Well, with that wonderful energy this morning, I welcome you to First Unitarian's online service. We are so happy that you are here with us today. Our mission here at First Unitarian is through spiritual connection and community. We listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. I'm Shannon Foos, Membership Coordinator, and leading worship today are Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan, Stacy Watson, Tommy Snell, Elizabeth Kricka, Brock Chasvold, and Orange Sky. Behind the scenes, as always, we have our ushers, greeters, and making sure that we come together, that we are safe, and we have a wonderful time. We also have a chat chaplain on hand. Today it is Elise Wall. Please feel free to reach out to her if you're going through a tough time or if you're worried about someone else. I have a couple of announcements today. First is that I'll be offering 201 at 11:30, so please see the link in the chat. Also, we have our Meet the Candidates for the Board of Trustees and the Nominating Committee, and that'll be happening at 11 o'clock shortly after service. So please stay and get to know these wonderful folks. Now, I have a special invitation for Reverend Sherry to a wonderful event. So here she is.
Good morning. It is so good to be here on a Sunday morning with you. And I've got a little bit of a change for those of you who have been joining us for a few weeks or a few months or a few decades, you know that this is the first time that I've been in our sanctuary here at 220 Winton for a little while. It is so good to be together. And I'll say it's a little bit of an adjustment for me because I'm used to sitting at my computer and getting to see many of your beautiful faces, getting to see what you're eating for breakfast, getting to see who you're trying to wave at or catch the eye of across the Zoom room. Now I'm imagining you across Rochester, across Monroe County, across the world as we tune in together to be together as it is good to do so on a Sunday morning. We're starting to do little experiments. Many of you are excited by the recent guidance from the CDC saying that vaccinated people can be unmasked indoors. A lot of you have been asking, when are we going to be back in person in worship? And some of you have also been tracking the numbers here in Monroe County, seeing that we're making good progress on vaccination rates, but community spread of COVID is as high as it was last fall. So we're keeping an eye on both of these things, and our values as a community of inclusion that cares about science and public health and trying to connect where we can cares about doing things in a way that is safe for as many people as possible. We're going to be trying a series of experiments, ways of getting together over the coming months to prepare for being back in person indoors in the fall. And the first of these experiments, well, I'm here coming to you from the sanctuary, and we know that our internet is working well. And if we go out, Tommy will preach. He doesn't know it yet, so let's hope it goes well. But in 2 weeks, not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after, Memorial Day weekend, I want to issue a special invitation to those of you who are ready to try something in person. We're going to be having our annual flower ceremony in person and online. So if you've really loved joining us at 10 a.m. from your bed or your bedroom window and eating waffles, stay right where you are. You'll be able to join us in this exact same Zoom room. But if you're eager to try, I invite you to click on the link in the chat. We're going to drop that in, and you'll be able to RSVP for our first in-person worship since March 2020. We're really excited to be able to greet groups of you. We'll be doing it masked and socially distanced because there are lots of folks in our community, including young children, who haven't yet had the opportunity to be vaccinated. We don't need to know your vaccination status, but we do need to know that you're committed to the health and safety of all. So you'll see on the reservation form that we've got safety protocols there. I'm really looking forward to being with you all, not only next week online, not only in 2 weeks online and in person, but in the months ahead as we try to figure out how, as a community, we are best going to be able to connect with each other. I'm so, so proud and honored to serve this congregation, and I'm deeply excited to join in this first experiment with you. So sign up. If we run out of spots, we'll add more. So invite some friends, but make sure that you've reserved a spot so that we make sure that there's room for you.
For that wonderful news, so we can center ourselves, let us all take a deep breath together. Please join me in lighting your chalice and saying our chalice lighting words. May the flame we now kindle inspire us to use our power to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, and to seek liberation in the fullness of community.
Years ago, I decided to leave my position as a senior security engineer to take a lecturer position at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and to become a PhD student. It was a leap of faith, really. Aside from the financial considerations, I was leaving a position where I was an expert to take one where I would be in an unfamiliar milieu and would be a novice researcher as a PhD student. You see, I had decided that more underrepresented people like myself needed to be in computer security. And I reasoned that as an educator and mentor, I could be a part of the solution for the critical shortage in the discipline. As a part of my program, I was required to attend weekly seminars where students and faculty would give talks about their research. The first several weeks of these seminars were painful as they dove deeply into niche topics in computer science and did not touch on areas that were my expertise. I walked out of the third seminar feeling completely disheartened and questioned my decision. Perhaps, I mused, I wasn't intelligent enough to do a doctorate after all. However, a friend of mine reminded me that I had skills that an average academic didn't. And as it happened, the very next seminar was about computer security. I understood every word, even if the research methodology was less familiar to me. I looked around the room at my classmates during this talk and could see that many of them were confused though. As we filed out of the room, I asked one of my classmates what she thought of the talk, and she looked at me with wide eyes and said she hadn't understood it at all. And isn't that why we come to church? It would have been easy to remain in a position where I was an expert. However, real growth only occurs when we're willing to step into the unknown and grope through the darkness. Having companions who also struggle and feel lost at times helps us to trust that we will eventually find our way.
Please join me now in voice, body, and spirit as we sing Turn the World Around. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Oh, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight, turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit. Only can the spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life, but you are. So is life. Oh, so is life, but you are. So is life. Oh, so is life, but you are. So is life. Oh, so is life, but you are. So is life.
This is the ancient Persian story of the Simurgh, originally told in the 12th century by Farid-ud-Din Attar and retold by Jorge Luis Borges in the Book of Imaginary Things. The Simurgh is a benevolent, mythical, flying creature, an immortal bird that nests in the branches of the Tree of Knowledge, far away in a distant land. One day, the other birds learn that the Simurgh has dropped one of his splendid feathers. These birds have been living in anarchy, and they are tired of it, tired of chaos, struggle, and confusion. They know there must be a better way, and they need the wisdom and guidance of a great leader. So, they decide to venture off to find the Simurgh. They know that this journey will be long and difficult, since the great benevolent bird's castle lies way out in a distant mountain range that forms a ring around the earth. But it's got to be worth the journey to find deliverance from the chaos that surrounds them. A better world must be possible. So this group of birds heads off to see the Simurgh, and right away many of the birds lose heart. The nightingale bails. He can't bear to be apart from his beloved rose. The parrot wants to go right back into the cage in which he's lived his whole life. The partridge cannot do without the comfort of her home in the hills. The heron can't stand being away from the marsh, nor the owl away from his ruins. But finally, certain of them set out on the perilous venture. They cross 7 valleys, 7 seas, each one with an alarming name. The next to last sea was named Bewilderment, and the last one, Annihilation. Many of the original pilgrims desert. The journey takes a deep toll on the rest of the travelers. They are exhausted, depleted, and at the end of this arduous journey, only 30 birds are left. These birds were frightened and tired, but they kept moving together, and they finally reached the great peak that the great Simurgh bird is said to live upon. And the birds land. They prepare to behold their king, to receive their answers, to rest into the end of chaos. But there on that mountain peak, there is no great mythical bird. It's just them on that peak, just 30 birds. And this is because they are the Simurgh. Because it turns out that the word Simurgh means 30 birds. And the Simurgh is each of them and all of them together.
With gratitude to Foothills Unitarian for the telling of the Simurgh, this story of birds who join together, but who do not start their journey knowing that that is how it will end. We are so connected, even when we didn't know it at the beginning. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, God of many names, no name at all, and one abundant love. Source of endings and beginnings. We come into this space with hearts overflowing. Some of us carrying joys and celebrations, others carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone. We come reeling from the news, both local and far away. We lift up the loved ones of Mark Gaskill, killed at a traffic stop by police officers earlier this weekend. May truth and justice and the indisputable grief of a life lost be held in love. May his friends and family know that they are not alone. May we know that the struggles of over-militarized policing are not limited to us here in Rochester. We lift up the lives and the loved ones of those killed in Palestine over the past week. death toll increases, and feelings of helplessness and despair from far away are tempting. But we know here in community, know here in this place where our burdens are not carried alone, that we are connected, that lives lost and grief held need not be something that sets us apart. May compassion be awakened within us. May our pain help us to better see and hold struggles around the world. May we know here in this moment to pause and to rest, that we are nourished and fortified for the journey ahead. And that no matter how scary or how uncertain it seems, none of us need navigate any of this alone. Here into this space of gathering, I invite you to name into the chat, typing so that others might bear witness, or saying aloud, or simply speaking in your own heart, a burden that you're carrying today that you'd like to share, that you need not carry alone, that having friends and a circle of love to hold you will not fix it, but might for a moment make it lighter. What is it that your heart yearns to share this morning? For burdens and sorrows named out loud or in your own heart, we share together a silence. The trust we offer to each other in naming the parts that are too heavy to carry alone. Turns also to knowing that our eyes and our ears and our ability to feel and understand the beauty in the world is not our task alone either. Here in community, we know that even cinder blocks can be sacred, that blossoms, though they may fade, are beautiful today. We know that the struggles here in Rochester were lifted up and helped and informed by those who struggle in Palestine. We know that the ways in which we are connected, though they fracture and do harm, also help to buoy our spirits and to put us in the path of beauty. And so I invite you now to name also in the chat something that brings you joy, or simply to name it out loud. If it feels like a struggle to find just one thing, it is in particular your task. The joys and celebrations that we carry are too numerous to name. And yet the beauty that you witness is mine to behold also. May we together lift up our spirits. Know that what we experience as struggle and pain and suffering is real, but it is not the end of the story. May we be nourished and strengthened. May we be lifted by the beauty of this morning. In this silence, here in this room, I know that I am connected to all of you. I know that the silence in this room does not obscure the truth and reality that together as a community, we are stronger and more able to carry both pain and beauty. May it be so. Amen and blessed be. Our reading today comes from Daniel Ladinsky. His book of poems is called Poems by Hafiz, which is confusing, and so often this will be attributed to the Persian poet, but it is indeed Daniel Ladinsky. You carry all the ingredients to turn your life into a nightmare. Don't mix them. You have all the genius to build a swing in your backyard for God. That sounds like a hell of a lot more fun. Let's start laughing, drawing blueprints, gathering our talented friends. I will help you with my divine lyre and drum. Hafiz will sing 1,000 words you can take into your hands like golden saws, silver hammers, polished teakwood, strong silk rope. You carry all the ingredients to turn your existence into joy. Mix them, mix them. when our welcoming congregations team, the folks who are charged with helping us as a congregation continue to be welcoming and perhaps even deepen our understanding and welcoming of the LGBTQ community, both for those of us who identify as part of that community and those who don't. When that team asked me to preach today on International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia, I was skeptical, nervous, not because it wasn't a worthy cause or a date worth honoring. May 17th has been named some variation on International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia for almost 2 decades after all. And isn't that important? Doesn't it fall right in line with, at the very least, our first and sixth principles, both the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and justice, equity, liberation, peace for all? Isn't it an obvious choice for us? Indeed, it is. As a faith community, Unitarian Universalists have often moved to be vocal in our support of this and our community. But I was skeptical. I was nervous. And I was nervous because I knew it would require me to be more vulnerable than I'd like to be. I knew it would require me to trust all of you, to hold this story, to know something about me that I don't often like to talk about to hundreds of people on the internet. And yet they persisted. And I melted. And I trust you. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, says that if you trust the people, they become trustworthy. Adrienne Marie Brown has taken this up as one of her principles of emergent strategy and embedded it into the leadership ethos of a whole new generation of leaders, preachers, and community organizers. If you trust the people, they become trustworthy. And so it is with that spirit that I tell you of my time in Uganda. Not all of it, it was a couple of years at least, but as a young, recent college graduate, I joined the Peace Corps and was deployed or invited by the Ugandan government to live there for 2 years and work among Ugandans. As I prepared to leave, I learned that legislation had been introduced at the national level in Uganda to criminalize aggravated homosexuality with the death penalty. I had no intention of being out as a queer person in Uganda, but you have to assume that this gave me pause, and it did. I hesitate to tell you this story because I don't want you to take this away from Uganda. I don't want you to only think that Uganda is a place where homophobia might be possible and is indeed alive. It's not that it's not true, it's just not the whole story, or even the truest story. It was a sad and strange relief as I got on that bus with 60 other Americans, young and old, to go to JFK and board a plane for Uganda, that I learned of yet another killing of a queer person in New York City, where I had lived for the previous 15 years. As I sat on this bus wondering what the next couple years of my life would be like, I set this particular anxiety of mine up on the shelf, being able to look around and say, if this was possible here in the States, well, it was possible everywhere. And so I might as well take the risk. When I arrived in Uganda, though I didn't seek out conversations about this, nervous as I I learned that much of the campaign for this legislation, for this work against people of different sexual orientations, and indeed also gender identities and expressions, was funded and fueled by American religious groups. I learned that having assumed an end to the culture wars here in the States, American missionaries went abroad pushing a homophobic agenda in other places. I learned that most Ugandans that I met didn't care particularly about homosexuality or sexual diversity. And in fact, in the area that I lived in, sexuality, romantic relationships, and friendships existed on a fluid continuum that was very different than what I was used to and wasn't embedded with the fear and the homophobia that I had been led to expect in traveling to Uganda and making my home among this new community. When I learned that the campaign was funded and fueled by American evangelicals primarily, but not exclusively, I understand too the responsibility of Unitarian Universalists, both abroad, but in particular here in the United States, to be an unwavering, calm, and deeply unfussy, stable, and consistent place of affirmation and welcome. We take up today a particular day where we talk about homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia, but this needs to be embedded in each and every Sunday, needs to be embedded in each and every meeting, gathering, and the ways that we are the church throughout the week. This past month, for the first time, Americans have tilted over into being primarily nones. That is to say, there are more Americans who are not religiously affiliated than are. Globally, Americans have a reputation for being rather religious, but this has shifted dramatically in the last 60 years, and in particular in the last 10 years. When you ask folks who grew up in a religious tradition why they no longer attend services regularly or consider themselves to be a part of that tradition, more often than not, though the reasons are many, more often than not, you hear testimonies of religious traditions and communities that were narrow, rigid, and homophobic. As Unitarian Universalists, though we may be proud of our past movement and action, we are not exempt from these forces of fear and hatred. Here in our own community, whispers and doubts and a reluctance to change means too that we fail, not universally, but often, to be a place of welcome and love for youth and young adults and people for whom sharing pronouns, being inclusive of people across the gender spectrum and diverse sexual orientations is a simple baseline. If that has to be a struggle or a fight or a deep explanation for every newcomer or young adult returning to our fold, it often feels not worth it. How could a place that feels so dislocating of so many people be our spiritual home? Young adults wonder. And yet, we do have a history of working towards marriage equality, a history of ordaining gay and lesbian and trans and bi and queer and non-binary ministers, of elevating the leadership of people across the gender spectrum and with diverse sexual orientations. We have a history to point to and shoulders to stand on, a place to move from that allows us to grow and to shift. But it requires trust. Our monthly theme, Trusting in Transformation, it cues us up for the idea that whatever's happening now, we ought to believe that the next thing, the transformed thing, is possible, even inevitable. We have to trust the process. We have to know that the ways in which we are changed will be okay. And I think in lots of ways that is true. But when we talk about it that way, we presume that that trust is an easy thing, that one merely need to decide once and then it happens automatically. Those among us of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities and expressions, by which I mean everyone among us who is not cis or straight, and increasingly that is more and more of us, we know that the trust that's required in transforming community is not a single decision, but something that happens again and again and again. That in every new space, the decision to engage in a conversation that doesn't seem easy is a choice. One that you could decide to engage in, and one that you might not. This trust I want us all to recognize as a gift. A choice that one can decline to give, to hold for themselves, or to give away, knowing also that we are not diminished by that giving. This is not to dismiss or undercut the real possibility of exclusion and violence, transphobia and queer phobia of all types runs through society in employment discrimination, in social consequences, and indeed in physical violence. And those realities are not things to be taken lightly. But in human community, when a risk assessment allows us to make a different choice, to be vulnerable, and to choose to share a little bit more of ourselves, we give a gift to others. And I hope that others receive it as such. One of the most touching parts of my job, the thing that stops me short in my tracks, and if we're walking together or journeying, I often stop, caught up short by the truth and beauty of what is shared with me. When parents and grandparents and friends tell me about a time that somebody shared something with them that felt vulnerable. Often this comes up around sexuality and gender, but it's not just that. These parents and grandparents, they report this to me sometimes with a bit of fear, looking for affirmation. Did I respond well? Did I squander that gift? Or did I treat it tenderly? Sometimes they come excited, knowing that the trust that their loved one has placed in them has been something that they weren't sure would be possible. Maybe it's a revelation of something that they've known for a long time, and yet finally hearing someone say it out loud to them is an affirmation of the ways in which we are in community. Those birds traveling together, those birds traveling together who finally stop upon that mountaintop to look around and take each other in. Those birds in search of the king. They find, of course, that there isn't something separate and apart, no future that's been transformed for them, but instead a present that's been transformed by them. Here at First Unitarian, and indeed drawing on the wisdom of womanist theologians and Chance the Rapper, we often talk here about not believing in kings, but believing in the kingdom, the beloved community on our horizon, the imagined, transformed destination that indeed does not feature a singular savior, but instead a transformed community where we treat each other and see each other as kin. Here in this community, here at First Unitarian, here in Rochester, and here in the greater world, I invite each of us to move into a place of trust, a place of vulnerability and risk-taking, where we might seek to repair, restore, or risk relationship with another person. It doesn't have to be something particularly hard, but it does need to be a little bit of a challenge. And so we'll take a little moment just now, no longer than a minute. And if you're with someone, I ask you to turn to them and think about a risk that you're willing to take, something in the next week to build relationship. And if you're not sitting with someone, but instead you're sitting with all of us, I invite you to type it into the chat, to name something that doesn't come automatically or easily, but that might build relationship, but requires trust from you that the gift will be well received. It could be a phone call to someone you've lost touch with. It could be an apology that you know that you needed to make. It could be a truth about yourself that you're holding back. Take 30 seconds and speak it to the person next to you or those of us here together in the room. I'm seeing some big commitments in the chat, and maybe you're hearing some wherever you are. Here in community, may we know that we are nourished and strengthened for the week ahead, that the journey that we are on together requires trust, and that together we will be transformed. Octavia Butler writes that all that you touch, you change. But she writes too that all that touches you changes you. When we offer the gift of trust to other people, when we take risks to be vulnerable, we open ourselves to the possibility not only of transforming others and our community and the world, but of being transformed too by that. May it be so. Amen.
Please join me in singing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
We invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. Each week, members and friends generously contribute to our offering, which helps to sustain our church and an organization in our community. This week's collection is especially important as it will support our goal of recertifying as a welcoming congregation for our LGBTQ siblings and community. This week, we're sharing the plate collection with the Mocha Center of Rochester. As a home for LGBTQ communities of color, the center's focus is on providing both preventative health and wellness care for mind, body, and spirit in equal amounts. The center's offerings are extensive: free health testing, counseling, a drop-in center, and substantial Facebook and YouTube programming. The Mocha Center offers a safe place to network, socialize, and address any health issues queer and trans folks of color may face. There are many ways to give, including Venmo and Simple Church. Please give generously to our plate collection. Our offering will now be received with gratitude.
Please join me now in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
You carry all the ingredients to turn your life into a nightmare or to turn your existence into joy. And this is the day. This is the day we have been given. So let us rejoice. Let us be glad in it. And let us mix those ingredients with trust, with vulnerability, and the deep sense that on that great swing that we build, as we go flying off into this week, into the world, we will be caught. Amen. Go in peace. I love you.